Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we are talking about lead scoring. We're talking about lead scoring. We're going to we're going to go through all of the best practices that we have learned at Brilliant Metrics over the last several years to implement a high-performing lead scoring program. So a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, we will be monitoring the chat both on the live stream and in Zoom. So if you have questions, please do post them to the chat. And I will either answer them live as we're going, or we will have a little Q&A period at the end as well. A copy of these slides will be sent to you. Don't worry about trying to grab screenshots of stuff. If you are coming in through the live stream, there will be a QR code you can scan at the end to request a copy of the slides. If you are coming in through the Zoom, that means we already have your email address and we know you're here. We'll get you a copy of the slides that way. Okay. Moving on here. A little bit about me. My name is Steve Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO here at Brilliant Metrics. In addition to leading the team here and guiding our team forward through client strategy and growth, I am a public speaker. I speak at a number of different venues and forums, as well as teach through UW-Milwaukee School of Continuing Ed. Brilliant Metrics is our agency. Brilliant Metrics is a B2B marketing agency. And what sets us apart from other agencies is that we are really good at simplifying complex ideas, breaking down some of the FUD, the fear and uncertainty that's out there in marketing today, and producing actionable strategies out of the chaos, I guess would be the best way to put it. All right, today's agenda. We're going to go through a little bit about what lead scoring is, why, and how it should work, right? We're going to talk through how you assign certain point values to certain activities and how you make those decisions. The importance of a decay model, which is something that not a lot of shops implement, but we put into every single lead scoring program we put in place. How filters make or break a lead scoring program, and then finally, how to create an effective feedback loop so that you're continuously improving the quantity and quality of leads that you're generating. So why should you use lead scoring? Well, lead scoring solves the problem of producing a higher quantity of leads than you can get through what we call raised hand leads. People filling out forms or picking up the phone asking for your products or services. When you're able to identify intent from prospects who aren't ready to fill out a form and aren't ready to pick up the phone, you can increase the number of leads. This has a side benefit of getting those leads in front of salespeople earlier in the buyer's journey. So this is while people don't necessarily have a front-running vendor they're planning to select. This will improve close rates, but it does mean that your sales team will be talking to people that aren't necessarily ready to buy or ready to even talk to them. And so not every lead you hand off to the sales is sales ready, and they need to be ready for that before you implement a lead scoring program. So how should a lead scoring program work? Well, the first step is identifying a person. This connects the dots between a record in your marketing automation platform. That could be HubSpot, it could be Mautic, Marketo, what used to be known as Pardot, that now Salesforce has kind of not given a name to, or ActiveCampaign. Any of these platforms will identify the browser of an individual and link it to their record inside of the marketing automation platform. And it does that by dropping what's called a first-party cookie. So it essentially drops this identifier into the browser and saves it as a first-party cookie. Now, some of you might have heard cookies are going away. That's not exactly true. Third-party cookies are going away. First-party cookies like this are what keep you logged into a website when you fill out the login form, so you don't have to do that for every single page. So these types of cookies are basically part of the fabric that makes the internet work, and they're not going away. They will reduce in duration, but they're not going away. So dropping this cookie then links that prospect's browser with the record in the marketing automation system. And now all of their future activity inside that browser can be linked and recorded in the transcript on their record in the marketing automation platform. We can also assign points. So using that first-party cookie, we track all of the engagement when somebody clicks and engages with content. They could be coming from an email. They could be coming just from a Google search. Once that person ID has occurred. And I'm going to take a step back. I didn't talk about how that person ID occurs. There's two ways that the marketing automation platform can connect those dots. One is if that person fills out a form. If they're putting their contact information into a form, then that is enough information for the marketing automation platform to recognize that contact information is tied to that browser because they use that browser to fill out that form. The other way the person ID occurs is if they click a link in an email. When an email gets sent from a marketing automation platform, it's tagged with some additional information that connect the dots between any browser activity with that record in the marketing automation platform. Apple has put in some controls in place to try and limit some of this tracking, but for the most part, definitely the forms still work all the time, and emails, depending on the configuration, can still work on Apple devices. Okay, so back to tracking engagement. Once that browser's been identified, every action that's taken in that browser by that person is recorded inside of the marketing automation platform, provided it happens on your website. So you can't track activity on youtube.com. You can't track activity on facebook.com or linkedin.com because those aren't your domains. You don't control them. But your website, if it's properly configured, any activity that happens on that website gets tracked. So every time a good activity, an activity that indicates intent, occurs on the website, not only do we track that activity in a transcript, but we ratchet up a score value inside of that record. So now each one of those activities ratchets up that score. There's a threshold at which point, if a record crosses that threshold, for us, we set it at 50 points usually. So if a record crosses that 50-point threshold, at that point, it's considered a marketing qualified lead and it gets routed to sales. So this is how lead scoring should work and how it does work for brands that are effectively using it. But in order to get it set up correctly, the first question that most people have is, how do I assign these point values? What gets a score increase? What activities get a score increase? And the key here is we're trying to detect intent. The way that we look at this is really through two lenses. The first is it meaningful engagement? Because if it's just somebody hitting a page on your website, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's meaningful engagement. They have to actually dig in and take action on that web page, or at least spend some time on that web page before we consider it meaningful engagement. Any time spent with your brand improves that person's understanding and awareness of your brand and starts to make them more of a qualified lead. So we'll usually assign a small point increase for any meaningful engagement on the website. But if that meaningful engagement occurs on in what we call a high intent context, on a page on the website that only somebody who's like more than an eighth of the way through the buyer's journey would be visiting, then that starts to mean that there's that not only is that person engaging with the brand, but they have a problem or an opportunity that your product or service can help with. And so at this point, we start to add larger point increases for those activities. But not all point changes have to be positive. If somebody has meaningful engagement on a page that is clearly off the path to purchase, their reason for engaging with your brand has nothing to do with buying something from you, that's an indication that we should actually decrease the points they've accrued, because they're indicating that they're not there to buy, they're there for something else. And at a minimum, we need to undo any points we added during that session. And at a maximum, we need to drive those points even further down. So let's come back to that concept of meaningful engagement. When we talk about meaningful engagement, the challenge is people will visit your website without having any intent to do so. This happens when you send an email and their email security system goes and clicks on all the links to make sure you're not trying to infect them with a virus. This is why click-through rates are going up in platforms as more and more receiving systems implement these security checks. That's not a human that's clicking those links. That's not the recipient of those emails clicking those links. It is a bot that's going to make sure that those links are safe. Prospects will accidentally click links. I mean, you and I do that all the time when we're browsing the internet, especially on a mobile device where we're trying to scroll and we accidentally tap something and now all of a sudden we're on a web page. And then finally, prospects don't really read. They scan, and in many cases, they'll have some confusion about what it is that you're offering, what the CTA is, what the message, what the headline is, and they'll click on something, misreading it or not really reading it at all based on some picture or something, and be someplace they don't mean to be. So to mitigate these challenges, you want to do a few things. One, don't just automatically take a link click or a web page visit as meaning engagement and assign points there. Instead, you really want to track engagement on those pages. So here at Brilliant Metrics, we have something called a soft conversion. This is a meaningful engagement on a page. It can mean scrolling past 50% on the page. It can mean staying active on that page for more than 15 seconds. It can mean downloading a PDF or filling out a form. Those are all meaningful engagement. We'll usually assign just a point for somebody who has scrolled past 50% or spent more than 15 seconds on any web page on the site. That means they spent time with your brand. That's a good signal. Then there are signals that are more meaningful engagement, like watching a video to 75% or downloading a PDF or completing a form. And for those, we'll usually assign an additional point because they already have to be on the page to be able to do those things. The next angle on this or dimension on this is the context. Did they have that meaningful engagement on a page that doesn't really matter to the buyer's journey, or did they have that meaningful engagement on a page that only somebody who was really ready to purchase would be engaging? So high intent contexts are things like a product or a service page, a configurator or assessment to help them understand what product they need. We call them problem-aware or solution-aware blog posts. A problem-aware blog post is where you're getting into the nitty-gritty of a problem or an opportunity that might drive somebody to purchase your product, helping them frame that problem or opportunity in a way that clarifies the situation for them and ideally guides them into your product or service. A solution-aware blog post is, okay, not only do I know I have this problem, but I know that your product is the solution, and now I'm researching that product. That type of a blog post has a high intent. And finally, case studies. These are all examples of your high intent type of pages that you're going to increase the scoring threshold for it. Now, we'll often tag all of the pages on the website with a point in the buyer's journey for our clients and then feed off of those signals. So if a page has already been tagged as being due state, that's usually a solution-aware type of page, and it's going to increase the value of that meaningful engagement on that page. You also have low intent pages. These are the ones that you're just gonna track that meaningful engagement. You're just gonna assign that 1 point usually. Homepage, non-purchase content. So a lot of your blog posts are gonna fall into this category, especially if they're, the blog posts that drive a lot of traffic because they don't require somebody to be on a path to purchase to engage. And then finally, negative intent. These are those ones that you're going to subtract points when you have meaningful engagement on these pages. These include careers pages. People who are looking for a job generally aren't also shopping for your product or service at the same time. So you can safely pull back on their points if they're engaging in a careers page. Post-purchase services, if they're on your warranty page or they're trying to get service or support, unless you're trying to sell support services, in which case that's a different case. But generally, if they already have your product and they're trying to figure out how to use it or how to get support for it, that's not a signal that they want to purchase your product. So you want to put a negative score on that. And an investor portal is another obvious place to put a negative score, because if I'm coming to your website because I'm an investor, I'm probably not coming to explore purchasing your product or service. So a good starting point, any meaningful engagement, go ahead and toss a point at that contact. If they meaningfully engage with any page, that's worthwhile throwing a little bit of a score at them. Meaningful engagement on a high context, a high intent context page, here's where you want to start, generally at about 5 points. And you're going to adjust these scores as time goes on and the program progresses. We'll talk about that at the end when we talk about a feedback loop. And then meaningful engagement on a negative intent page, like something that's off the purchase path, an investor page, a careers page, etc. Here, we usually start out subtracting around 20 points. That'll knock somebody way down in their score, but won't necessarily knock them out. For the middle one here, when we talk about that meaningful engagement in a high intent context, depending on the level of intent, you might bump that up right out of the gate for your starting point. So if we're working with a client and they have a product configurator, well, obviously that's higher intent than a blog post framing the problem or solution. So that product configurator, we might give 10 or 15 points to. The same thing would be true for like an assessment or a video that is really do state really about how to buy the service, right? If they watch that video to 75%, they're probably really in market. So finally, you need to set that scoring threshold. We usually set this at 50 points. So when they get to 50 points, that's the point at which we send the lead off to sales. If you have any questions, please do get them into chat. The chat is looking awfully lonely right now. All right, so that's points. Now let's talk about a decay model. If you don't have a decay model in place, you can run into a situation like this, where somebody engages, and then goes dark, possibly for a series of months. And then they come back and they engage just a little bit, and all of a sudden they cross the threshold. Well, this engagement that occurred on this graph in July, that could be some really minor actions that just push them across the line, but they don't really even remember what they did back in February, and it might be not even relevant to the current project or what they're looking at today. And so now you've just mixed up a really old signal with a new signal and combined them to determine that this is a marketing qualified lead, when in reality, it's not. They just did a couple of things and you shipped them off to sales. Sales is going to be like, yeah, this person isn't anywhere near purchase. So a decay model steps down their points over time with inactivity. So the idea is anybody who has points, every week we knock them down by 5 points or 10 points until they eventually get back to 0. So when they come back to the site several months later, they're starting from 0. They're not starting from wherever they left off. A lot of lead scoring was built around the idea that somebody would only ever be interested in your product or service once, in which case this works. But for most businesses, you need a decay model in order to prevent false MQLs from somebody that started looking at something months or even years ago and then came back. So how do you set up a decay model? This is going to be a little different from system to system, but basically you create a list inside of the system. You feed that list into a campaign, workflow, whatever your platform calls it, where every 7 days you decrease the score on that contact by 10 points. If it's less than 0, set it to 0, and then restart that campaign or workflow. Implementing this will make a big difference in the success of your lead scoring program. All right, let's talk a little bit about filters. You don't want to send every record that has a score over 50 to sales. If you do, you're going to annoy them because they're going to get a bunch of junk and garbage. So a few filters that make sense in most cases. You'll want to filter out your channel partners. This means having, lists and segments inside your marketing automation system for those channel partners, those dealers, reps, distributors, consultants, whoever else that they're always on your website. They don't really count, unless they do. And we have had clients that they do count. Non-target industries. If you can put up some sort of filter around your ideal customer profile and the industries that you actually want to send over to sales because you know they can close them, it can often make sense. That may require some sort of enrichment in the database to be able to understand what industry every organization or contact is in. Generic emails and no company name. So if somebody's got a Gmail address or a Yahoo address and there's no company name in there, that's probably not a good lead. It's probably a consumer or a junk or something else. And it doesn't give the salesperson any context on what company that person's even with, because they can't even look at the domain name on the email address to know what company that person's with. So we'll usually filter those out. You're going to want to set geographic constraints. Most marketing automation systems will take the IP address of the visitor and automatically determine a location for them. So make sure that your location, you're not sending leads in Kuala Lumpur over to your salesperson if they can't service leads in Kuala Lumpur. If they don't have a phone number or an email address, the salesperson can't really do anything with that lead. So you want to filter those out. And then finally, previously unqualified leads. We'll talk about the feedback loop in a minute, but if somebody pops up as a lead and they're not qualified, you want to tag that record in the database so it doesn't pop up as a lead again. If you don't, they have a tendency to do that. And then you're just sending a bad lead to the salesperson over and over and over again, which that'll really annoy them. The goal here is to get as high quality leads as possible going to sales so they continue acting on them and are grateful for those leads, patting you on the back, and then you have a good partner on the sales side to continuously improve the program. If you out of the gate start sending garbage leads to sales, they check out, they won't give you feedback on them, they don't care about them because they're not helping them do their job. They're not helping them make their commission. If you're not helping them make their commission, you're banking on limited goodwill in order to get any feedback or engagement from sales in the program. And you need them telling you what a good lead is. All right, I've referenced this feedback loop a couple times. Let's talk about what this feedback loop is. When we set up a lead scoring program for a client, we set up this automation inside of the marketing automation system that will send a request for feedback to the salesperson every 3 days after that lead has been sent to the salesperson. It does not stop until the salesperson clicks one of these 5 categories. The categories are good, meaning not only is this a lead with some intent to it, but they're also fit within our ideal customer profile or an acceptable customer profile. They're the right size, an appropriate industry, etc. And after I called or emailed them, they were willing to talk to me, which means there was some intent there. That's a good lead. Bad timing means, yeah, okay, the industry, the company lines up, but either I talked to them and they don't need anything, or I couldn't get them to respond to me, meaning the intent really isn't there to purchase. They weren't quite ripe yet, right? Or maybe they were cold and not even remotely in market. So that would be a bad timing. Unactionable is sort of just okay, this again, like good and bad timing, this is somebody we want to continue marketing to, but they aren't actually a lead. So oftentimes we'll see things like referral partners or consultants or other industry folks that it's good that they're engaging with our content. It's good that they're on our website because they're in a position to talk about us in a positive light. And so we want them getting our marketing. We want them engaging, but it's not a lead. I can't follow up on it because I can't sell them anything. The last 2 are the bad ones. So here we have a bad fit. This is where somebody has intent, but they're not anybody we would ever really want to sell to. You'll often get, like, I call them guys in their garage here. So these are startups and companies that really don't have the means to engage with you yet. Maybe they will in a year or two or three. This could also be an industry that you just can't serve. That would be a bad fit. And then finally, junk. This is the stuff that's clearly garbage that has made its way into the database. Students often end up here. You'll see spammers end up here. Sometimes you'll see just, vendors end up here. These are records you want out of the database. They're junk, they're garbage, they're not helping the business in any way, shape, or form. So the way the platform, and so let me come back to this. For bad fit, we'll set up an automation in the system that will mark those as what we call marketing suspended, meaning they're not going to get any more emails. They're not going to be included in any paid media targeting. The record will stay in the database because if you take the record out of the database, they'll pop back into the database at some point and then pop back up as a lead, which is not what you want. So you keep the record in the database, but you mark them marketing suspended. The junk, the automation will just flat out delete. We'll usually set that on a 30-day delay, so there's an opportunity for a human to review it before it actually gets deleted from the system. But that junk then gets out of the marketing automation platform. It doesn't continue to clog up the system and give you a false sense of how many subscribers you have and other statistics. Okay, so how do you respond to this feedback? Well, if you're tracking all of these leads and you're tagging each one of these records inside of the marketing automation platform with those 5 different statuses, now you can run reports and go and do a little bit of a digging and see how these leads have gotten to the point that they were sent over to sales. For your junk and your bad fit leads, these are the ones you want to carefully evaluate the sources. How did they get into the database in the first place? Did they sign up for a webinar? In which case, okay, let's look at the topic of that webinar. Maybe we missed the mark there because we attracted a bunch of people that aren't ever going to buy from us to this webinar topic. Maybe you've got some resource on your website that's gated that they have to fill out a form to download. Well, evaluate the quality of the people who filled out that form over time. If it's mostly good and these are the outliers, great, keep it on the website. But if 95% of the people filling out the form are not the kind of people you'd ever want popping up as an MQL, maybe you just don't gate that resource anymore. For the ones that come up as unactionable, this is a good opportunity to put some filters into your marketing automation platform to prevent these people coming up as MQLs. These are often, again, those referral sources or partners that you have in the marketplace. If you can figure out how to identify those records in the database, you can put a filter on them so they don't pop up as MQLs, because it's not helpful to sales when they pop up as MQLs. For your bad timing and your good leads, the good leads are the ones that, yes, everything worked exactly like it's supposed to. The bad timing are the ones that they're qualified, but maybe we were a little bit too aggressive on our point actions. And so you want to look at where can we dial back those bad timing, the point actions that contributed to bad timing leads. Where can we dial back those point actions without sacrificing the good leads that we were getting? And there is no like formulaic way to do this. It really is just popping up a bunch of good records and a bunch of bad timing records, and you'll probably spot a couple of point actions on the bad timing records that are a little bit overzealous. And dialing those back a little bit will help. I'd encourage you to go and look at the good records and see if there are any common themes there that you can increase point values a little bit as well. Otherwise, you'll decrease the total number of MQLs you're pushing across the wire. So that's it for today. To sum up, lead scoring produces more leads, but they're earlier in the buyer's journey. That's usually a good thing, but some salespeople get frustrated because it means they're not ready to close. Points should be assigned based on engagement and a high intent context. So any engagement is good unless it is in a non-purchase place, careers, investor portal, post-sales support, etc. And then engagement on a high intent place is really good. Product pages, case studies, configurators, etc. A decay model is what prevents MQLs that pop based on activity that occurred in the distant past. So you always want to have a decay model in place to prevent that from happening. Other filters will help you prevent you from sending bad leads to sales. This is something that needs to be maintained over time by looking at those unactionable leads that got sent over to sales. And then finally, the feedback loop that gives you that data for that unactionable. The feedback loop is absolutely paramount to having a successful lead generation program using lead scoring. Not only because it allows you to optimize and tweak the model over time, which is really important, but it also demonstrates to sales that you care and you're listening and you're not just trying to hit some quota of leads to flip across the wire. So with that, if you have any questions, let's get those questions into chat. And if not, I want to encourage you to please follow us on LinkedIn if you haven't already. If you'd like to meet with me, you can go ahead and scan that middle QR code. And if you're on the Zoom, you will automatically get the recording of this and the slides. But if you're on the live stream, scan the third QR code to request that that recording and slides. All righty. It looks like I did a decent job and we don't have a ton of questions. If